Howdy, y'all. Namaste, and welcome back. Welcome to Lesson 9, our next stop on this religious quest. Lesson 9 on Matisyahu, this contemporary reggae rapper, superstar, awesome, great musician. And we're going to narrow our focus now to this one Jewish thinker and the musical evolution of Matisyahu and the covenants of the Hebrew scriptures. So I want to start by giving a quick review, right, rolling back way back to lesson 4, which was taught by 2020 version of Brad. When we asked, what does religion mean? What does the word religion mean? And we looked at several different theorists, including Jonathan Z. Smith. And J.Z. Smith said that religion does not exist, right? He said,
religion is solely the creation of the scholar's study. It is created for the scholar's analytic purposes by his imaginative acts of comparison and generalization. Religion has no existence apart from the academy.
Religion is the invention of the scholar's study. But then that raises the question, right? Well, then how do we study it? What does it mean to study it? And there's another great theorist, Wilford Cantwell Smith. His name was Wilford Cantwell Smith, and he wrote this really influential and important book called The Meaning and End of Religion, and said, when we use the word religion, we really have two different things in mind. On the one hand, we've got cumulative traditions, right? Scriptures, rituals, culture, practices, all those sorts of things, right? That accumulate over time, that sort of add on. And those are things that we can study, right? We can look at scriptures, we can look at traditions, and we can look at rituals and those sort of things. So we did that in the previous lesson, 8.2. But he said, we also use the word religion to mean personal faith, right? And so each individual person is different. Each individual person is complex and lives a long life and grows and changes physically and grows and changes intellectually, grows and changes spiritually and emotionally in all these other ways.
Hume's point was that humans change. We're just this stream of consciousness, but I'm constantly changing who I am. My desires change, my feelings change, my thoughts change, my understanding of myself change. My body certainly changes. This is not the same body that I had when I was 15. Our bodies change, our thoughts change, our emotions change, everything changes.
Right? So if we want to study religion, then we can either look at sort of cumulative traditions and rituals and practices, right, on the one hand, or we can look at, narrow our focus onto one individual person and see what is their, how do they understand their religious practice, their religious beliefs in the real world, right? And how do those things change over time? So that's basically what we're doing this time. In order to do that, I want to give a quick review. I know the last lesson was jam-packed with a lot of information. It could be potentially overwhelming. So I want to just highlight a couple of key points from that lesson, which are relevant to our study of Matisyahu here. So first of all, what is a covenant, right? So this is a review of the Jewish cumulative tradition, the texts and traditions, those sort of things. So what is a covenant? Well, a covenant is just a formal agreement, like a contract, between two or more parties. And it's just stipulating, here's what the deal is. Something that both parties formally agree to and sign, show a sign that one is committing to this covenant. And we looked at a number of key central covenants in the Hebrew scriptures. The covenant with Noah, the covenant with Abraham, the covenant with Moses, the covenant with David, and the new covenant, or the covenant with Jeremiah. And now we're going to quickly review two of those, the Mosaic covenant and the Jeremiah covenant. We also went over the prophets. The prophet is a mouthpiece for God and usually says something like, hey, you're not really keeping the spirit of the law, or you're kind of missing the point here. So the Mosaic covenant was a covenant revealed to Moses on Mount Sinai, right? And it was a covenant between God and the entire Jewish community, the entire nation of Israel as a social community, not with each individual person. And the emphasis there was on the letter of the law, right? And the covenant basically is, if you obey my voice and keep my covenant, you shall be my treasured possession out of all the peoples. Indeed, the whole earth is mine, but you shall be for me a priestly kingdom and a holy nation. Some of the aspects of this, right, involve all these mitzvot, these commandments, right, circumcision. And because it's with the community, right, God says, I will punish the children for the iniquities of parents and those sort of things. Involves ritual sacrifice at the Temple Mount. We talked all about those kind of things, right? And kosheric law, how you should dress, how you should eat, how you should cut your hair, those sorts of things. Then we looked at the new covenant, the covenant with Jeremiah, which is a different kind of covenant, right? God says, you didn't keep my old covenant, so I'm going to give you a new one. And this time, instead of writing the covenant on tablets of stone, on stone tablets. I'm going to write it on the heart of each individual. I'll put my law within them. I will write it on their hearts, and I will be their God, and they shall be my people, right? So here, the covenant now is between God and each individual person. So it's, focus on the heart of the law more than the letter of the law. Then we looked at the Nevi'im, and particularly the prophet Amos. The emphasis there is on the spirit of the law, right? Amos says, get rid of all those rituals and songs and worship and all those kind of things that you're doing. That's just noise to me, right? I don't care about all that stuff. What I care about is justice and righteousness, right? You got to keep the spirit of the law. You can keep the letter of the law and miss the point, miss the spirit, right? And God says, what I really care about is the spirit of the law. You got to do justice and do righteousness. Let justice roll down like waters and righteousness like an ever-flowing stream. Shifting gears a little bit, just a quick history. Obviously, these cumulative traditions change over time. That's part of the challenge and the beauty of studying these religious traditions over time. In the 19th century, during the Industrial Revolution, Jews asked themselves, what does it mean to be Jewish in modern society, right? What are some of the options? What does it mean to be a Jewish community in modern society? They came up with a couple of answers to this question. How should we as Jews locate ourselves within society? We could either be culturally Jewish in a religiously diverse society, or religiously Jewish within a religiously diverse society, and kind of keep this public-private divide, right? So religion is something private and personal that we do, but then in our daily lives, workplace and that kind of stuff, keep that public-private divide separate. And you have a number of different traditions here, which we aren't going to go into much detail at all about. But Reform Jewish tradition is one strain of that. Conservative Judaism is another. And Reconstruction Judaism, which we'll look at a little bit in a minute. Then another response to it is, maybe we should have a separate community. We should exist separate from the rest of society, right? A self-governed Jewish society. And many Jews have answered that question that way. Usually refer to themselves as Orthodox Jews, where they live together and they govern themselves and educate themselves, that sort of thing. Or the Hasidic community, which we'll look at also in this section. But let's go back again, right, to Wilford Cantwell Smith. He said there's two different ways that we use that word religion. One is to refer to cumulative tradition, scriptures, rituals, and cultures. We've kind of studied that already. But what about that other element, personal faith, right? What if we narrow our focus to see what is it actually like to embody Jewish faith in today's world? And for that, we need to narrow onto one person, right? So personal faith means it's going to be different for every person. So let's look at one person. And I want to look at this guy, Matisyahu. So Matisyahu was born, birth name is Matthew Paul Miller. Was born in 1979, young guy, right? He's even younger than me. So he was born near Philly, in a suburb of Philly, and then moved to White Plains, New York, and attended Hebrew school at Am Shalom Synagogue in White Plains, New York. And so this is a Reconstructionist Jewish community. And so, the best way to learn about somebody's personal faith is just to listen to them, right? That's step 3 of the phenomenological method. Just listen. If we want to know what somebody believes, ask them and listen to their own words. Let them speak for themselves, right? So Am Shalom Synagogue has a website, and here's a picture of the building, right? They describe themselves as a congregation of joyful, spiritual, welcoming families and communities. They say, we warmly welcome all generations and religious backgrounds, including interfaith families, empty nesters, singles, LGBTQ, the scholarly and observant, and those who are new to Judaism. We are bound together by a shared belief in a thoughtful and progressive approach to Judaism. With a deep respect for tradition, we seek to evolve as the world around us evolves. The creative spirit of our members fuels our community as together we learn, share life cycle events, right? Tom's tweet, crossing and dwelling.
Religion can also help people to move through time. It may be as simple as marking the Sabbath each day of the week, or Holi each year, or rituals such as Hajj, which mark movement through both time and space.
And support one another, right? Religion is something that binds us together.
Religious practices, religious communities, scriptures, traditions, rituals, all of those sort of things, they help to bind people together.
And commit to tikkun olam, repairing the world, invites us to join them. So Rabbi Lester Bronstein is the rabbi of the Am Shalom Synagogue. And he describes on, in his website what the three central tenets of Reconstructionist Judaism, which are Torah, prayer and ritual, and Mitzvot. So let's look briefly at each one of these, again, in Rabbi Bronstein's own words. He says the Torah, right? Tradition tells us, these are his words, tradition tells us that the Torah was dictated by God to Moses and then transmitted through the generations. Reconstructionist Jews see the Torah as the Jewish people's response to God's presence in the world and not God's gift to us. That is to say, the Jews wrote the Torah. But that is not to say that the Torah is merely a human creation. The Torah is a response to the sacred. It is an attempt to convince an entire people to view everyday life in a sacred way. Turning then to the next pillar, right? Prayer and ritual. He said, we understand prayer to help us perform the task of awakening. We need to awaken ourselves to the miracle that is life and to the obligations that inhere in that life. We believe that we are the primary respondents to our own prayers, and that we need prayer to remind us of the godly values behind our benevolent actions in the world. We also understand prayer as a way of calling out to others in the world in the hope that they too would sign on to the godly enterprise of healing, caring, and righting injustice. Finally, mitzvot. Mitzvot, right, commandments. Reconstructionist Judaism teaches that the mitzvot are our own invention. Mitzvot are our particularly Jewish ways of responding to the universal God. Paradoxically, it is the mitzvot that keeps us Jewish, but which simultaneously attune us to the greater universe of which we are a tiny part, right? So Matisyahu attended Bet Am Shalom for Hebrew school, but he dropped out of high school and became a Phish-head, right, and followed the band Phish all around. He started listening to a lot of Bob Marley, as he describes in various interviews. And especially Bob Marley lyrics, right, as he was noticing all these references to the Jewish scriptures and the Jewish tradition. In a 2008 interview, he told Jordana Horn, like a lot of American kids, I was not really interested in Judaism, and was around that age started to make self-discovery. A few things came together for me. I started listening to Bob Marley, and that informed some of my identity in terms of Jewish references within reggae music, was kind of a pull for me towards piquing my interest in Judaism. So I thought it'd be good to look, it'd be great to have a section on Bob Marley. We could do the same thing, right? Analyzing the personal faith of Bob Marley through his music and lyrics and changing over time. But we can just do a little bit of that, right? So Bob Marley's outstanding album called Exodus, and the song by the same name, right? In that song, he says, open your eyes and look within. Are you satisfied with the life you're living? We know where we're going. We know where we're from. We're leaving Babylon. We're going to our fatherland, right? So notice all the references to the Exodus, right? Here, Exodus, the movement of Jah. Jah is a particular Rastafarian way of version of the Tetragrammaton, that Yud He Vav He, right? Movement of Jah people. Oh yeah, send us another brother Moses from across the Red Sea. So Matisyahu was listening to Bob Marley, right, and really started connecting again with the spiritual aspect and with the scriptural aspect and that sort of covenantal aspect towards liberation and understanding of his own faith. And he said, at that point, I was not interested or aware, in the early days, of the benefits of vocal training. I was doing it totally on my own, and that's where my life was spiritually too, right? So in the same way, he was sort of self-taught or autodidactic in his own musical aspect, right? Teaching himself those kind of things. He was also doing his spirituality on his own, right? And I was very much on my own with that too. It was my solitary journey. But once I became religious, it became more about community, right? And searching out answers through other people, right? Learning from one another and beginning to see the world through one another's eyes and putting the scripture at the center, right? Using the scripture as an anchor and tradition as an anchor, and the discourse around those texts, which we've talked so much about before in this, in various lessons throughout this course, right? So he began to long for those sort of interactions with other members of his community that were, engaging in the scriptures and this spiritual journey together, right? In 2001, Matisyahu joined Chabad-Lubavitch, and shortly thereafter, a few months after, moved to Crown Heights, Brooklyn. So Crown Heights, Brooklyn, like we said, right, there are different ways, different questions about how to be Jewish in in the modern world. And one way is to keep this public-private divide, right? You go to synagogue during the weekends, and then you live a different, you live more a secular life during the week. Or this community, Chabad-Lubavitch community, right, emphasizes the communal aspects of it, right? That the covenant is between God and a community, a society, right? A community that we're in together. And that community lives together, primarily in Crown Heights, Brooklyn. So the word Chabad is an acronym, Hebrew acronym. I've seen a lot of those through our study of the Jewish tradition, right? Standing for these words, chokmah, or wisdom, bina, or comprehension, and da'at, or knowledge, right? Lubavitch, so Chabad-Lubavitch. Lubavitch is the name of a Russian town where the movement started. Unfortunately, I don't think there's any members of the community that live there, right? They were mostly wiped out during the Holocaust and during the World War and those sort of things. So now most Chabad-Lubavitch members live in Crown Heights, Brooklyn, or in Israel. The Chabad-Lubavitch movement or community is very mission-oriented, right? Primarily, their mission is primarily towards non-practicing or non-religious ethnic Jews, right? Members who are descendants of Abraham, descendants of Jacob, who are not practicing their religious faith, but are still part of the covenant if they choose to be, right? So calling out to those people, mission-oriented towards that group of people in order to bring them back into the community. Right, most of them live in Crown Heights, Brooklyn, and Israel, as I've said. Now, quick review, right? The Mosaic covenant is a covenant between God and the entire nation of Israel as a social community, not with each individual person, right? But with the community as a whole, emphasized on the letter of the law. So after Matisyahu joined Chabad-Lubavitch as part of this community, then he understood himself, as part of that covenant, that covenantal community, right? And recorded this album, Shake Off the Dust, Arise, in 2004, which has this super dope track, King Without a Crown. Definitely one of his biggest hits, maybe his biggest hits. He's got some big ones, but this is one of them. Right, and I'd like you to watch this. It'd be good to pause this or something and go and watch that lecture. Maybe I'll put a break here, right, and I'd like you to go and watch that. I can't put it in here for copyright reasons. That'd be nice, but if we were in class, I'd just show it. But watch that video, right, and as you're watching it, right, do some active watching, active listening. Maybe watch or listen to it more than once. Right, but ask yourself, who is the intended audience, right? Who is this mission-oriented song? Who's it intended for? Who's it trying to speak to? What is the story that's being told through the visuals, right? So I'll give you a hint here, right? There's a boy who's lost, disconnected, a Jewish boy who's lost, disconnected. He doesn't have a home. He doesn't have a community. He just feels lost and disconnected and alone, right? Matis says, if you're trying to stay high, you're bound to stay low. And in the end, the boy finds himself, right? He finds himself, and he finds this connection with a Hasidic man at the end. He finds his self, he finds his home, he finds his place with his Jewish heritage, community, traditions, etc., right? Religion is something that binds us together, binds us to a community, and binds us together in this sort of way. Also, I'd like you to ask yourself, right, as you're watching it, what does that phrase, king without a crown, mean, right? I mean, like most musicians, like most poets, like Matis says, there can be layers of meaning, multiple meanings, right? But it could refer to the kaput or yarmulke, or it could refer to Crown Heights, Brooklyn, right? The community of Crown Heights. But that's my interpretation. But you see what you think when you watch it for yourself. So, encourage you to go and watch that now, right?